Hello, and welcome to Edupedia World. In the previous session, we had talked about selecting, training, and developing employees. After employees have been on the job for some time, you should appraise their performance. The purpose of this chapter is to show you how to do that. The main topics we cover include the performance appraisal process, the appraisal methods, the appraisal performance problems, and performance management. Now, every manager needs some way to appraise employees' performance. If employees' performance is good, you'll want to reinforce it. And if it's bad, you'll want to take corrective action. Performance appraisal means evaluating an employee's current and past performance relative to his or her performance standards. Performance appraisal always involves setting work standards, assessing the employee's actual performance relative to those standards, and providing feedback to the employee with the aim of motivating him or her to eliminate performance deficiencies or to continue to perform above par. Now let's take a look at the difference between performance management and performance appraisal. Now, most companies, most people get confused between the two and always think it's the same thing, but it's not. Now, performance management is a goal-oriented system to ensure that organizational processes exist to maximize the productivity of employees and then ultimately the organization, of course. A performance appraisal is a formal system of review and evaluation of individual or team performance. Performance management is an ongoing organizational process that is conducted to maximize the productivity of employees, with the overall intention of improving the organization's effectiveness. It is strategic in nature and involves every person and all HR processes in the organization. All are directly tied to achieving the organization's goals. Whereas the performance appraisal is a periodic event, and usually it's an annual event in most companies, which happens at the end of every financial year. Some companies do it twice a year, that is, every 6 months. So, performance appraisal does is it evaluates past performance with the intent to identify strengths and weaknesses of an employee's performance and to identify development goals. And a performance appraisal is just one part of a performance management system. So it's basically the final step or the last step in the performance management process, and it is completely owned by the HR department. Now, who is involved in this process, right? So the performance management process involves all levels in an organization. The strategic goals are set by the organization, and they filter through the organization and affect the goals and activities of each employee. In addition, the performance management process gathers and updates current employee data to maintain the human resource information system. Now, the HRIS contains a skill bank of employee information that enables the HR department to determine if the organization has the right mix of skills and people to achieve the organization's goals. And this information is used in all areas of HR decision making. Now, effective performance management requires ongoing communication between supervisors and staff. The assessment and review part of the process provides the opportunity for documentation and formal communication. It is the time for the supervisor and the employee to set development goals that reinforce the organization's strategic plan. And if there are areas of problem performance, action plans for improvement are discussed. There should be discussion of the employee's career progress and plans made for training and long-term career growth. So many supervisors see the appraisal process as a motivation tool to improve the employee performance. Now, the employee's main objective, right? What does the employee want to know? The employee's main objective is to obtain feedback from the supervisor on his or her work performance. And ideally, employees receive feedback at all times and not just through the review process. The employee will also expect organizational support in his or her career growth. And together, the employee and the supervisor should identify areas for improvement and set goals for training and skill development, of course. Anything the supervisor can do to enhance the employee's skills will benefit both the employee and the organization. Now, if the organization links performance appraisal to compensation, then most employees will expect a raise as a result of a positive review. Now, though supervisors generally conduct the review, they may not have a say in the amount of compensation awarded, because compensation is normally determined by organization policy. And this can be particularly problematic for supervisors who want to motivate employees through the appraisal process, but then find that the organization's compensation to be a demotivator. So for this reason, many supervisors prefer that compensation increases are not linked to the performance appraisal process. Now, performance management goals. Performance management is not a one-time event. That is what we had discussed in the previous slide. It is a continuous process. It should align with the organization's strategic goals, and it requires open communication among managers and staff. And it also provides time for formal feedback. But employees should receive continuous feedback from their supervisors and not just at review time, right? And the HR also plays a very significant role in the performance management process. So all the way from the prerequisites through the entire process, the HR participates in goal setting during the strategic planning process. They conduct the job analysis and they ensure the job analysis information is correct. And these are crucial steps in a successful performance management system. And through this system, the HR supports and trains managers in the skills necessary to execute their part of the process. And then the HR designs and implements the performance review system and makes sure that managers have the skills necessary to offer timely, unbiased employee ratings. And it is also the HR's responsibility to monitor the process to ensure there is documentation that accurately represents employee performance. And this can be used to make personal decisions without fear of discrimination and litigation. HR supports employees as well as the managers throughout the process by acting as an advocate for all employees. And they should establish a due process system for employees who do not agree with their performance ratings. So HR acts as a sounding board for employees, allowing the issues to be heard and addressed, and they protect the integrity of the system by insisting on objective, timely reviews and addressing employee concerns with due processes. Now, the performance management process, there are 5 steps in this. An important concept of performance management is that it is a continuous process characterized by open communication between employees and supervisors. The second concept is a clear identification of the link between employees' contributions and organization's goals. So, the first part of the performance management process is performance planning. So once the prerequisites are in place, the next step in the process is performance planning, where the organization establishes the criteria and expectations for an employee's performance. So supervisors must communicate this to employees in such a way that everyone understands the expectations. It would not be appropriate to expect outstanding performance from employees if they have no idea how the organization describes and measures outstanding, right? So clear communication is a central part of the performance management process. And in this step, the manager and the employee together identify what needs to be done and how it will be accomplished. So this includes the consideration of results and appropriate behaviors to accomplish tasks. And the supervisor and the employee must agree on the objective to be accomplished. And these are the specific outcomes the employee is expected to achieve. Outcomes must include specific, measurable performance standards. and these are called SMART goals, right? So it is SMART is an acronym, right, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals. So it is very important that we assign specific goals. The employees who have specific goals usually perform better than those who do not. And we need to assign measurable goals. Always try to express the goal in terms of numbers and include target dates or deadlines. And assign challenging but doable goals. So make them challenging but not so difficult that they appear impossible or unrealistic. And of course, at the end, encourage participation, performance. So an example of a SMART goal, right? Now say if you had written an objective that was say the employees, one of the expectations would be, or the objective of the employee would be, increase widget production, right? Now what does that mean, right? The employee has absolutely no idea how to get this done. The objective sounds like a good goal, but basically how to accomplish the task and how to measure this accomplishment, it's going to confuse both the employee and the supervisor. So a SMART objective would be, we could rephrase that into something like control product defects to increase annual widget production by 5% while maintaining the current budget and specification levels. So this fits the SMART formula, right? It's specific. It tells the employees what the end result should be, a 5% increase in production, basically. So it tells employees what to work on, which is the product defects. It identifies the time period, which is 1 year. And finally, it gives measurable parameters for accomplishment within budget and specifications. So the objective is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Now, accomplishing objectives is a shared responsibility between the employee and manager. It requires both to be committed to achieving the desired results. So if the objectives are set by the manager only and the employee doesn't agree, then successful accomplishment is unlikely. So if there is a disagreement on goals, negotiation and compromise must occur. So no progress can be made unless everyone is on the same page. Success also requires open, ongoing communication between the manager and employee. A manager who sets goals for the employee and then walks away and doesn't check to see if goals are being accomplished until the next review period is setting, and the employee and the organization is set up for failure. So the manager is responsible for giving feedback to the employee, coaching and encouraging when needed, and praise when things are going well. And the employee is responsible for communicating progress to the manager and keeping the manager informed of any deviation from timelines, budgets, or other problem areas. So manager is also responsible for providing the employee with resources needed to successfully complete the task. This is where the R part of the SMART acronym comes into play. It is not realistic to expect high-level performance from an employee if he or she is not given the necessary resources to make it happen. And if resources are unavailable, then there is simply not enough time, money, or supplies, and this must be taken into consideration when the objectives are set. Now, because the manager plays a key role in the assessment process, the manager must be aware of the employee's work. It is the manager's obligation to provide accurate observation and documentation of the employee's accomplishments. And the manager should never review an employee if that employee's work is not known to the manager. Now, the performance assessment and review we would be discussing in the next slide. It's basically, we would be going into detail on as to who does the particular assessment, and the final stage in the performance management process, it is essentially the reverse of the performance planning that occurred at the outset, and it is the time to assess the activities and make adjustments to improve the process for the next cycle. So for example, if objectives were set unreasonably high, then readjust the objectives and affirm where the process should be in the future. And remember, performance management is an ongoing cycle. So, essential to the recontracting process is discussion of prerequisites and planning for the next cycle. And one cycle merges into the next as a seamless continuing activity. Now, in the traditional appraisal process, employees are appraised by their supervisors only. And it is assumed that the supervisor is the best person to know and assess the employee's work. This worked well when employees worked in the office with their supervisor, allowing for easy observation of performance. Now, technology now enables employees to work at various locations, often at sites separate from their managers. And this has increased the need for evaluation from peers, customers, and co-workers. And consequently, many organizations have moved away from a single rater appraisal process to a multiple appraisal system, where employees receive feedback from a variety of sources. Now, although supervisors are still likely to be key components of the process, in many organizations, staff members conduct appraisals for managers as well. And the most extensive appraisal results from a 360-degree feedback process. In this system, employees receive an appraisal from people both in the organization and outside the organization as well. And in 360-degree feedback process, a retail sales clerk would receive an appraisal from his supervisor, from his peers, that is the other sales clerks, managers of other departments or inventory personnel in the organization, as well as appraisals from customers and vendors employed outside the organization. So the advantage of this system is that employees receive the widest possible range of feedback, and the appraisal is less likely to be skewed by one person in the event of its personality clash or favoritism. And one disadvantage of this system is its scope. With many people involved, the system becomes costly and time-consuming to administer. So most organizations have settled with systems somewhere in the middle, not as extensive as a 360-degree feedback, but not simply one appraisal from the supervisor. And some companies also make use of the rating committee, right? And committees usually contain the employee's immediate supervisor and 2 or 3 other supervisors. And using multiple raters makes sense, although there may be discrepancies among ratings by individual supervisors, but the composite ratings tend to be more reliable, fair, and valid. So using several raters can also help cancel out problems like bias and halo effects. So there are a variety of appraisal methods available to organizations, and the method selected by the organization should fit well with the organization's goals and be appropriate to the job being appraised. And some organizations use different methods for different positions, regardless of the system used. Regular communication and feedback from managers are more important than the method used. Coming to the first method, which is the graphic scale rating scale, it is the most commonly used appraisal system. Evaluators record their judgments on a scale that includes about 5 to 7 categories. And categories are defined by adjectives such as outstanding, meets expectation, or needs improvement. And this method is popular because it is easy to administer and can be quantified if desired by adding a numeric value to each description. The next one is the ranking method. The evaluator places employees from a particular group in the order of overall performance. So starting with the top performer who is rated the highest, and then moving down to the poorest performer in the group who receives the lowest ranking. So paired comparison is a variation of the ranking method in which the performance of each employee is compared with every other employee. And the comparison is often based on a single criterion, such as overall performance. And the employee who receives the greatest number of favorable comparisons is ranked the highest. And this can be difficult to administer if your work group consists of a large number of employees. The next method is the forced distribution method, and this requires the evaluator to assign individuals to a limited number of categories, much like a normal frequency distribution curve. So a few individuals will get very high ratings and a few will get very low ratings. And with the majority averaging in the center of the curve, generally those with low ratings are subject to termination as with the ranking method, and this system requires the evaluator to place some employees at the bottom, even if their performance is acceptable, and some at the top, even if the performance may actually be less than outstanding. The system makes the erroneous assumption that there must be some outstanding workers and some poor workers, even when they may not be the case. That may not be the case. And forced distribution is unpopular among managers because many believe it destroys teamwork and fosters cutthroat competition among employees. Next, we have the critical incident method, and this requires the evaluator to maintain records of employees, favorable and unfavorable performances. So, a record is maintained, and these critical incidents become the basis for evaluation. And the incident log must be maintained over the entire evaluation period to eliminate the problem of just evaluating an employee's most recent performance. Then we have the essay method. The evaluator writes a brief narrative of the employee's performance. The major criticism of this method is that it is very subjective because the evaluation criteria is left entirely to the discretion of the evaluator, and the results are dependent on the writing skills of the evaluator. So it can be difficult to compare the results of employee evaluations that use the essay method because there is no common criteria used for evaluation. Next, we have the BARS method, which is the behaviorally anchored rating scale. This combines elements of a traditional rating scale and a critical incident method. So various performance levels are described on a scale, and the evaluator compares the employee's performance to the levels described. And the descriptions provided reduce the amount of judgment required of the evaluator, and they rely on the evaluator's observations of the employee's work behavior. The next method is the MBO method, which is management by objectives. It is a results-based system that relies on the manager and the employee to jointly agree on objectives, and the attainment of which becomes the basis of evaluation for the next appraisal period. Now, potential appraisal problems. The managers are not always comfortable being the appraiser, and some simply don't like the idea of judging the work of others. And others may have an inaccurate idea of what a manager is supposed to be. So some assume that good managers are tough and may give harsh ratings because they don't want to be seen as pushovers. Others may give lenient ratings, wanting to be liked by staff, or fearing hostility or backlash if ratings are less than outstanding. And none of these positions provide accurate ratings of the employees involved. Of course, managers are humans, and there are some people they like and some they may not like, and bias is a common problem in performance appraisals. And managers must be reminded that performance appraisals should be objective. It is not an affirmation of friendship, nor an opportunity to get even with someone you dislike. It becomes a serious problem for the organization when a manager manipulates the appraisal process to get a disliked employee fired or a favored employee promoted. Remember, performance appraisals can be an evidence in litigation, and the organization may be asked to defend their accuracy. And there are other errors as well. There is the halo effect, when there is one outstanding trait of an employee that overshadows all other activities in the appraisal. And then there is the horns effect, when one negative trait overshadows all the good an employee has done and results in a negative appraisal. Now, just as some managers give strict or lenient ratings, some are too timid to give much of rating either way. So instead of making a judgment, they simply rate all employees right down the middle of the scale. If it is a 1 to 3 scale, everyone gets a 2. And if it's a 1 to 5 scale, everyone gets a 3. So this can also occur when organizations ask managers to justify their ratings if they are anywhere other than middle of the road. If it's too difficult to justify, the managers will just stick to the middle. Or it may simply be that the manager can't differentiate one way or the other. And whatever the reason, some employees probably deserve middle ratings, but it is likely not a true reflection of all staff. And organizations can avoid this by using a scale with an even number of ratings. And it is hard to find the middle number between 1 and 6. Now, recent behavior bias may occur when a manager fails to keep records of employees' performance. Rather than looking at all behavior during the performance period, the manager rates only the most recent employee behavior because it is all the manager can remember. And appraisals must rate the entire performance period since the last appraisal was done and not just the last 30 days. So good managers keep records of employee performance, not just negative performance but outstanding performance too. So if records are kept, it is much easier to write the appraisal when the time comes. Appraisal can be inaccurate when the supervisor is unable to observe the employee's performance. Even with good intentions, a supervisor is likely to be able to observe all employee behavior and critical incidents can be missed. This is particularly a problem when the supervisor and the employee work at different locations. Sometimes a staffing change can result in the assignment of a new supervisor who has had only a short time to observe employee behavior. And when observation is impossible, the supervisor must rely on results for assessment instead of behaviors. The possibility of error reminds HR how important it is to train managers in the performance appraisal process and to be vigilant in detecting appraisal patterns from managers that may signal inaccurate ratings. Conducting a performance review, right? So after what may seem like endless amounts of preparation time, everything is ready and it's time to sit down with your staff member and discuss his or her appraisal. Start by creating the proper climate for the appraisal interview. Conduct the interview in a private, neutral location. Make sure it's friendly and informal. The atmosphere is friendly and informal. And be sure to allocate enough time to conclude the interview without being rushed. You may be nervous at the prospect of meeting with the employee to talk about performance, especially if you have little experience conducting review interviews. Remember, your staff member may also be nervous, so it is your job as a manager to set the stage, create a comfortable environment, and ensure a productive discussion. So start by thanking the employee for setting aside time for your meeting. No doubt your staff member has just as many time pressures as you, and you want him or her to know that the performance review is important. Explain the purpose of the interview and what you want to accomplish. Start by discussing the employee's self-appraisal. Ask him or her to comment on it and ask if there's anything else that should be added. Then move on to the appraisal you completed. If there are differences in ratings between you and the staff member, this is a time to discuss those differences for you to explain your rationale for the ratings you gave. The appraisal should be future focused. Remind the employee the purpose of the review is for goal setting and growth. Be sensitive to the employee's feelings and always begin by providing positive feedback. Point out specific accomplishments and note how the employee contributed to the team's effort and to the organization's success. If there are problems with performance, the purpose is not to find fault, but to address it and concentrate on what actions can be taken for improvement. Avoid discussion of negative personal issues. Instead, concentrate on the employee's task-related behavior and the consequences of that behavior. It may be important to reinforce the requirements of the job. So give the employee a chance to discuss his or her feelings and reactions and to put your input and feedback. And listen and allow the employee to say what he or she needs to say. Pay attention to verbal and non-verbal cues. If there are areas that need improvement, encourage the employee to come up with potential solutions. Individuals are always more likely to follow through with solutions to a problem if they created the solution themselves instead of having a solution mandated to them by management. If the employee has a satisfactory or better rating, focus your discussion on setting objectives. If the employee has unsatisfactory performance, work together to create a development plan. Follow the guidelines your organization has for performance improvement plans and ask the employee to summarize the plans that you agreed on. This helps ensure the employee understands what is expected next, and if compensation is a part of your organization's review process, discuss the changes in the employee's compensation and share any rationale for the adjustment or other information as necessary. If follow-up meetings are needed after the appraisal interview, schedule them at this time. If follow-up is more informal, then let the employee know when you will touch base again. Remember, it is important that feedback and communication is ongoing with all employees, not just with those who have problems. And ask employees to sign the appraisal form and give them a copy. If the employee disagrees with his or her appraisal rating and refuses to sign, note that the employee chose not to sign and offer a copy of the document anyway. Summarize the results of the meeting and recap any important information needed to carry out future plans. Be sure to remind the employees of any follow-up dates. If appropriate, discuss the process your organization has established for employees who disagree with their performance ratings. And make sure they know the appeals process and what they have the information or documents needed to generate an appeal. Now, the disadvantages of an appraisal system. An appraisal, probably this is where we kind of understand why maybe a performance management system is much better than a performance appraisal system, right? So many organizations tie compensation to the appraisal process, believing good appraisal ratings deserve reward and at the same time hoping that a compensation reward will motivate employee productivity. And this sounds like a win-win situation. A problem occurs though when the organization is not able or willing to reward employees with compensation levels employees believe they deserve. And managers find it problematic to praise an employee's good work and ask for continued or even increased productivity and then reward the employee with a minimal increase in compensation. Now, employees who are disappointed with their compensation increase may be less motivated and less productive, and worst case, find employment elsewhere. And as a result, many managers often prefer an appraisal system not linked to compensation. So problems can result when managers and employees don't agree on the appraisal ratings. When the manager rates the employee lower than the employee expects, it can be a difficult interview, and employees may respond with decreased productivity. Managers must ensure that the employee understands the rating criteria and the rationale for the rating score. And it is important to emphasize the positive aspects of the appraisal process, goal setting, development plans, and the opportunity for better results next time around. Many managers don't like to assess employee performance, and some say it makes them feel like a judge or a jury. And consequently, procrastination is commonplace when it's time to get the formal paperwork done and schedule interviews with employees. It is management's responsibility to complete performance appraisals in a timely manner. And when employee appraisals are due and managers put them off, it sends a message to employees that their work is not respected and their appraisals aren't important. The HR department needs to make sure that there are no procrastinating managers. Managers need to maintain records and documentation of each employee's performance. If the performance appraisals are not done if it's done once a year and the manager has kept no records of the employee performance, it is difficult to remember what happened and it is impossible to appraise appropriately. So most likely the manager will remember and appraise only the most recent behavior, leading to an incomplete and possibly inaccurate assessment of the employee's work. If information is maintained as a continuous process, then the manager has the information necessary when it's time to write the appraisal review. And this makes the manager's job easier and ensures that the employee receives fair and valid appraisal. So when performance management systems are poorly managed and don't work as intended, there are a number of negative consequences. It is impossible to make accurate and equitable employment decisions when employee files are littered with false and misleading information. Employees know when a favored employee receives an undeserved performance rating, or when a supervisor unfairly gives staff inappropriately high ratings. So, decisions made on such inaccuracies result in employee cynicism, distrust in management, and loss of morale. At least we can expect lower productivity. But worse yet, poorly managed performance managed systems will send the best people packing and may lead to claims of discrimination and litigation. Thank you so much for listening in. Our next session would be on coaching careers and talent management. I hope you enjoyed this session and have a good day.